Right now, somewhere on Earth, a massive dish is pointed at the sky. It is listening. It has been listening for over 60 years, and so far, it has heard nothing back. But the real answer to what happens the moment that silence breaks is far stranger than anything you have imagined. You assume first contact would look like the movies. Ships in the clouds, panic in the streets, soldiers loading rifles at an empty sky. That is not what the scientists who actually study this question expect. Not even close. Here's what they expect instead. A signal. A blip on a screen. A pattern that should not exist in nature, buried inside radio noise from a star hundreds of light years away. No ship, no landing, just data. And that data would take years, sometimes centuries, just to reach us in the first place. So what actually happens to you, to your brain, to your species, the moment that message arrives? That question has been studied more seriously than you might think. Let's start with why we are even listening. In 1961, astronomer Frank Drake sat down and wrote an equation. It was not meant to give a precise answer. It was meant to organize a guess. The Drake equation multiplies together the number of stars, the fraction with planets, the fraction of those planets that could support life, and the odds that life becomes intelligent and communicates. Depending on which numbers you plug in, the answer ranges from "we are almost certainly alone" to "the galaxy should be teeming with voices." Nobody agrees on the numbers. That is the uncomfortable part. We built a formula for one of the biggest questions in existence, and it still runs on guesswork. This uncertainty has a name. It is called the Fermi paradox, after physicist Enrico Fermi, who once looked at his colleagues over lunch and asked a simple, devastating question. If the universe is so vast and so old, where is everybody? Billions of years, billions of stars, and so far, total silence. Either intelligent life is rarer than we think, or it exists and has reasons to stay quiet, or it has already come and gone before we ever looked up. You live inside that silence every single day without noticing it. Your brain is not built to hold a number like 100 billion galaxies. It is built to track 30 or so relationships, a handful of predators, a small patch of land. So when scientists ask you to imagine contact with something truly alien, your mind reaches for the only reference point it has: other humans. That is why every fictional alien has 2 eyes, 1 mouth, and an opinion about conquering us. It is not because that is likely, it is because that is all your imagination can draw. Astrobiologists will tell you the truth is almost certainly less dramatic and far more unsettling. The first sign of alien life probably will not be a ship. It will more likely be a chemical signature in the atmosphere of a distant planet, a gas that should not be there unless something living put it there. Microbes, not marauders. Something closer to pond scum on another world than a fleet on our doorstep. So why does the idea still make your chest tighten? Because your brain does not actually process microbes on Europa and invasion of Earth as different categories. Both trigger the same ancient alarm system, the one built to detect a stranger at the edge of the firelight. For most of human history, an unknown presence meant danger. A rival tribe, a predator, someone who did not know your rules and might not care. That instinct is thousands of generations deep, and it does not update quickly just because the modern version of the stranger now lives 100 light years away. Here's where the story gets genuinely surprising. In 2018, psychologist Michael Varnum at Arizona State University ran a study funded in part by NASA, testing how people would actually react to news of extraterrestrial life. He did not ask people to imagine it in the abstract. He showed them real historical announcements, moments when scientists believed they had found evidence of alien microbes, and measured the language people used in response. The prediction going in was fear, panic, existential dread. That is not what the data showed. People used more positive language than negative. Curiosity beat fear. Wonder beat panic. That finding cuts against almost everything Hollywood has trained you to expect. Why would humans respond with curiosity to something that should, by every evolutionary instinct, register as a threat? Because context changes everything. A stranger at the edge of the firelight was terrifying because he might reach you by morning. A signal from 400 light years away cannot. Your fear response is built for immediate danger, not abstract distance. When something is too far away to touch you, your brain has room to feel something closer to awe instead of terror. It is the same reason you can watch a volcano documentary and feel wonder instead of the panic you would feel standing at the rim. Now imagine the signal turns out to be real, confirmed. Verified by multiple observatories the way seedy astronomer Jill Tarter always insisted any genuine detection would need to be checked and rechecked before anyone dared announce it to the world. What happens next is not a press conference at midnight. It is silence, sometimes for days, while scientists rule out satellites, radar interference, and simple human error. Real discoveries in this field die quietly in verification far more often than they make headlines. You have likely never heard of most of them because most of them turned out to be nothing. But say this one holds. Say it survives every test. What changes for you, sitting at home, scrolling through the news alert? Probably less than you think, and that is the twist nobody wants to hear. If the signal is a simple pattern, a mathematical sequence, a radio pulse with no readable content, your daily life does not change at all tomorrow morning. You still go to work. You still make coffee. The signal becomes a scientific and philosophical event long before it becomes a practical one. Astrophysicist Carl Sagan spent much of his career arguing that contact, if it ever came, would be less like a war and more like a mirror. It would not tell us about them nearly as much as it would force us to ask what kind of species we actually are. That question is the real center of this entire scenario. Not are they friendly? Not do they have weapons? The real question is what proof of another mind in the universe would do to the story humans tell about themselves. For most of history, every culture on Earth placed itself at the center of creation. Confirmation of another intelligence anywhere quietly ends that story for good, not with violence, with a single, undeniable fact. Some researchers think that shift alone could be dangerous, not because of the aliens, but because of us. Nick Bostrom, a philosopher who studies existential risk, has pointed out that humanity's response to a genuinely transformative discovery is unpredictable precisely because we have no historical precedent for it. We have never lived through anything quite like it. Every past first contact in human history was one human group meeting another human group. This would be the first time the stranger was not human at all, and that is where your ancestors unexpectedly become the most useful guide you have. Every time a human society encountered something radically outside its understanding, a new coastline, a new sky, a new people entirely unlike itself, it did not stay in shock. It adapted, it built new categories, it found new words. The same brain that once needed months to process the existence of a continent it hadn't known was there is the same brain that would eventually need to process the existence of a civilization it hadn't known was out there, slowly, unevenly. But it always finds a way to fold the impossible into the ordinary. So if the message ever comes, do not expect chaos. Expect a strange kind of calm. Astronomers double-checking their instruments. Governments debating who gets to answer and whether anyone should answer at all. A question groups like METI, led by researchers such as Douglas Vakosh, have argued about for years, since replying to an unknown civilization means you can never take the message back. Ordinary people going to work the next morning, carrying a fact too large to fully absorb, doing what humans have always done with facts too large to absorb, living with them anyway. That dish is still listening tonight. It has been listening since before you were born, and it will likely still be listening after you are gone, patient in a way nothing in your daily life ever asks you to be. And somewhere in that patience is the real answer to the question you started with. The moment we finally hear something back will not be the end of the story you thought you knew. It will be the beginning of a stranger, quieter one, and it starts the instant you stop looking up and start looking at yourself.